Listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of the third episode of Season 2 of Columbo, The Most Crucial Game. First broadcast on the 5th of November 1972 on NBC. This episode was written by the returning writer John T. Dugan, who previously wrote the Season 1 episode Dead Weight. The episode was directed by Jeremy Kagan. Kagan was born on the 14th of December 1945 in New York and got his degree from Harvard University in 1967, before attending the New York University Graduate Institute of Film and Television and AFI Conservatory. He has directed for film and television, with Columbo being one of his first jobs at the age of just 26. He would go on to direct episodes of Chicago Hope, Taken, The West Wing, and the deeply underrated procedural Boomtown, as well as the films Heroes with Henry Winkler, Sally Field and Harrison Ford, and also Van Avery, who crops up in this episode of Columbo, and The Big Fix with Richard Dreyfuss, and The Chosen with Maximilian Schell and Rod Steiger. His most recent film was 2017's Shot. He is 75. The episode begins with stock footage of a football game. We see it's at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. We then cut to Robert Culp from behind as he approaches the stadium, and spoilers, he's the murderer for the second time. After Season 1 episode, Death Lends a Hand. But this time he has a handlebar moustache. He makes his way to the Rocket manager's private entrance. He is the Rocket's manager, Paul Hanlon. But the owner is Eric Wagner, who, he explains to a new member of staff, doesn't attend the games. He excuses the staff member and then makes a call to Eric, who is still asleep under his black silk sheets, alone, but after a night of passion with a girl he indicates that Paul set him up with, and her sister. Paul tells him,
Get yourself out of there and dunk yourself in some coffee and get out to the pool, you hear me?
As they need to go to Montreal to buy a hockey team to fulfill Eric's dad's wishes of building a great sporting empire. Eric is played by Dean Stockwell. Stockwell was born on the 5th of March 1936 in Los Angeles. His father Harry was an actor and singer who provided the voice of Prince Charming in Disney's Snow White. As a result, Dean and his brother Guy both turned to acting as children. Dean got a contract with MGM, and at 9 years of age he was cast in Anchors Away alongside Frank Sinatra and Gene Kelly. He worked regularly over the next few years, appearing in 2 to 3 roles a year, although later admitting he did not enjoy being a child actor as he did so many serious parts, which he found difficult. After finishing high school, he took a break from acting for a few years before returning in several television roles from 1956 onwards. He moved away from acting again in the mid-60s, returning again in 1968 with a supporting role in Psych Out alongside Jack Nicholson. He continued acting in television throughout the 70s, cropping up in one-off roles in Mannix, Night Gallery, The A-Team, and in 2 episodes of Columbo, as well as roles in small films, before returning to mainstream success in the mid-80s. Roles in Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas, and David Lynch's Dune and Blue Velvet cemented him as a character actor not afraid to push himself in weird directions, as well as cropping up in big-budget films like Beverly Hills Cop 2. In 1989, he appeared in a regular role as the second lead in Quantum Leap, playing Al to Scott Bakula's Dr. Sam Beckett, which ran for 5 seasons. He continued to appear in one-off roles in TV and in smaller roles in films like Air Force One and The Rainmaker and the 2004 remake of The Manchurian Candidate. He retired in 2015. He is 85. After his call with Eric, Hanlon calls down to the team coach, played by returning actor James Gregory, who was last seen as the victim in Season 1 Short Fuse. Hanlon shouts at the coach over his decisions, but as he is doing so, he is changing into the white uniform of a concessions vendor. His clock strikes 2 o'clock, and he sneaks out of his office to an ice cream truck parked at the back of the stadium as the crowd sings the national anthem. As he takes off, he turns on a portable radio to keep up with the game. He stops at a phone booth and calls Eric to check if he's in the pool already, making sure that Eric can hear the radio to convince him Hanlon is still at the game. After the call, he takes off in a haste, leaving a little girl on the street shouting for an ice cream. Hanlon arrives at Eric's mansion, retrieving a block of ice from the truck. He makes his way to the pool, and Eric is surprised to see him. As he gets out of the pool to greet him, Hanlon smashes him on the head with the block of ice. Hanlon, though, has got his shoes wet, so takes a hose to wash away the wet footprints he's left. He returns to the game just as half-time approaches, and the coach comes to see him minutes after he's returned to his office. It looks like he's got away with it, and Hanlon looks very pleased with himself. We then cut to Columbo in his car at the crime scene, listening to the game on his car stereo. He makes his way to the pool, where everyone is certain it's an accident, including the coroner, played by Don Keefer, who also played the coroner the last time Robert Culp killed someone in Death Lends a Hand. Columbo is distracted by the score in the game. This is one of Columbo's real affectations, as the murderer isn't present, so we get a small insight into one of Columbo's genuine likes, football. Or it reveals he's a gambler, as in Season 1 episode Lady in Waiting, he notices the race results in the newspaper. This would go some way to explain his detective skills if he is occasionally playing the odds when he's following a particular line of inquiry that nobody else has spotted. The coroner is pretty sure it's a diving accident based on the way water has splashed onto the deck, but when Columbo is finally paying attention, he notices the water on the deck is not chlorinated, unlike the pool water, which puzzles him. So he asks for a full forensic investigation while he goes to the football game. This scene is the cause of some controversy, as Hanlon threw the ice he used to kill Eric into the pool to melt, which it has. However, the water he washed the deck down with has not dried by the time Columbo is there. I'm prepared to let this go, as I don't know for certain that it couldn't happen that way. It seems unlikely, but if the pool is heated and the area he hosed down is in some kind of shade, then I could believe it's possible to have happened that way. It's not so much of a plot hole for me because I can't absolutely be certain that it's impossible. Columbo arrives at the stadium with one trouser leg rolled up in order to help his shoe dry. He looks silly, but I think he's dangling some bait here to see how Hanlon reacts to the fact that Columbo got his shoe wet in the same way that Hanlon would have done. Hanlon doesn't react at all, which I think gives the game away to Columbo. Columbo tells Hanlon that Eric is dead, and Hanlon pretends to be shocked and devastated, as Columbo explains it looks like an accident, but they can't locate Eric's wife. He also probes Hanlon for answers about the water around the decking, which Hanlon brushes off. Columbo then goes to see the coach, who, while being questioned, reveals that Hanlon flew off the handle with him, but then was fine at half-time, despite the team not playing particularly well. Columbo then probes for a motive, but can't quite dig one out. This scene goes on for a little too long for me, especially as the only information Columbo gets out of it that is any use is about Hanlon's shift in mood. As we're about to find out, there's a lot of plot crammed into this episode, but this scene really slows things down and feels overly long in order for the important information to come out somewhat naturally. The next scene is back at the Wagner home, which looks remarkably similar to Ken Franklin's home from Murder by the Book. So it's not just actors that crop up more than once in Columbo. Here we're introduced to the family lawyer and best friend of Eric's father, Walter Cunnell, played by Dean Jagger. Jagger was born November the 7th, 1903 in Ohio. He studied acting at Chicago's Lyceum Arts Conservatory before moving to vaudeville, radio and Broadway by 1925. His first Hollywood film was 1929's The Woman from Hell with Mary Astor, before returning to New York. After some lead roles on Broadway, he signed for Paramount, making a slew of films in supporting roles for them as well as other studios. In 1949, he had his greatest success, winning a supporting actor Oscar for his performance in 12 O'Clock High. He continued in supporting roles, giving a touching performance as retired Major General Tom Waverly in White Christmas, and as the useless sheriff in Bad Day at Black Rock with Spencer Tracy. By the 60s, he had moved into television, gaining a regular role in the series Mr. Novak. After leaving that show, he continued to make one-off appearances in Kung Fu, Alias Smith and Jones, The Waltons, and of course in this episode of Columbo. His last role was in an episode of St. Elsewhere. He died on February the 5th, 1991. He was 87. Walter is looking for the housekeeper, but the new secretary is overwhelmed and not very helpful. Columbo is there, still looking for Mrs. Wagner, and Walter says he's looking for her too. During this conversation, Falk ad-libbed a line asking how much Walter paid for his shoes, and asking if he knows where he might get a pair for much, much less. This was something that Falk would do every now and then, partly for his own amusement, and partly to add to the character, and it's something that will reoccur. Hanlon turns up, and he and Walter have words while the secretary answers the phone. Columbo notices buzzing on the stereo that shouldn't be there when the secretary's on the phone. He tells Walter that it's officially a murder investigation, and the next scene is Columbo at the airport, and it's another overly long scene. He's followed Hanlon there, and Hanlon is there to meet Mrs. Wagner, but also make a surreptitious phone call, which Columbo sees. With a little prodding, Hanlon explains that Eric was very immature and regularly cheated on Mrs. Wagner, which she barely tolerated. Columbo tells Hanlon they are now looking at a rogue ice cream truck that was reported being in the area by the little girl from earlier. Columbo asks if Hanlon was in the box during the first half, which Hanlon angrily explains he was. Columbo also says he can't find any motive, before a devastated Mrs. Wagner arrives and is comforted by Hanlon. I think at this point it's safe to assume Columbo knows Hanlon did it, but doesn't know why. But the script is not nearly as tight as it could be. Hanlon is setting up his overly elaborate alibi, but because it's established the phone company can't prove Hanlon called Eric from the box, because he didn't, the alibi he does create for himself is meaningless. We then cut back to the Wagner home at night, where a man dressed in black breaks into the house, only to be caught by Columbo. He's Private Eye Ralph Dobbs, played by character actor Val Avery, in his second of 4 appearances in the show. He's there to remove the bug that he planted that was making the stereo buzz. Columbo tries to sweat his client's name out of him, and the next day Columbo visits Hanlon at a basketball court and reveals that Hanlon's office was also bugged, and he's happy to take Hanlon to the man who bugged him. They go to the Wagner house, where it turns out it's Walter who bugged the phones. Columbo takes this opportunity to reveal the ice cream truck probably came from the stadium, so it's vital Hanlon can prove he was there the whole time. Because Hanlon knew about the bugs, and he's going to use them to confirm his alibi, he is very pleased by the way things are going, and his glee is pretty obvious. I have to assume Columbo is doing this already knowing what Hanlon has planned, but if not, this would have been a dead giveaway. They listen to the tapes of Eric's phone calls, which confirm Hanlon's alibi. Sort of. The problem is the recordings come from Eric's phone, so it only really proves where Eric was. It's not an alibi for Hanlon. He's also able to worm his way out of setting up Eric with another woman a little too easily for my liking. In the next scene, Dobbs meets Columbo at a restaurant asking for his license and recording equipment back. Dobbs and Columbo both know Hanlon could have made a call from anywhere, so the alibi that's just been set up is already worthless. Dobbs reveals he got a girl, Eve Babcock, to act as a new secretary to plant the bugs, and Columbo goes to see her. Eve doesn't normally work as a secretary, she has another line of work. Columbo isn't immediately aware of this, but she's an escort, who mistakes Columbo for her client. Her client arrives before this is completely cleared up, leading to a very funny scene between Columbo and the client.
My name is Lieutenant Columbo. I'm from the Los Angeles Police Department.
Miss Babcock, about those stocks, I'll call you.
With the client gone, Columbo explains he doesn't care about her profession. He wants information about Hanlon, and works out Hanlon knew everything about the bugs. Eve is played by Rhoda and Mary Tyler Moore actress Valerie Harper in a brief cameo. Columbo goes to a travel agent's to check on Hanlon's Montreal trip, and while there, the radio is on, playing the game. While he's listening to the game, a cuckoo clock in the travel agent's office goes off, and Columbo has a light bulb moment. He goes to see Hanlon at the stadium and observes that Hanlon turns the radio down when he's speaking to Columbo, but turned it off when he asked about the wet decking. He then pushes Hanlon about Eve Babcock and how he knew the phones were bugged. He also reveals that despite his insistence, Hanlon could not have made the phone call from his office, as there is no sound of his clock striking on the recording. In some respects, this is the weakest episode so far, something which I didn't think I'd be saying at the start of this review, but while the direction and the performances are brilliant, the script just doesn't kind of work under any kind of scrutiny. Even if you overlook the wet decking issue that some people have, there are far greater problems. It's a nice idea in an inverted mystery to have a clue be something that isn't there, that should be, rather than having something there that shouldn't be there, but we already saw that in Etude in Black, so unless it's well executed it isn't going to be enough, and this is not well executed. Hanlon already has no alibi without the sound of the clock chiming, because there's nothing to prove he made his phone call from the box at the stadium. The recording just proves the call was made, so that elaborate alibi based on him finding out about the bugs from the hooker, hired by the PI, hired by the lawyer, is meaningless because he didn't use them to successfully prove exactly where he was. If he had somehow routed the phone call from the phone booth to Eric via his office, then he might have something, but that's not the case. The recording doesn't prove he was there any more than the clock chiming proves he wasn't there. He could have easily said he forgot to wind the clock until after he spoke to Eric or something similar. There's also the issue of motive, which feels like it might have been cut out for time, although there are many other things I would have trimmed down first. If that is a case, it looks like the motive is that he loves the wife and either wants her for himself or is just disgusted by how Eric treats her. Or he thinks he'll have more freedom to run the business with Eric gone. But it's never gone into in any great depth. There's also the issue of the sheer number of characters who exist only to help Hanlon establish a bad alibi. Because of the Bugs, the lawyer, the PI, and Eve Babcock are introduced but are completely unnecessary in the end. It's a shame because Robert Culp is a great antagonist for Columbo, and Falk gets a great balance of cleverness and silly in the script to have fun with. It's just that the central gimmick falls apart under even mild scrutiny. For that reason, I have to give this episode 2 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.